So exciting that they're about to submit.
All right. I think it's 3 o'clock. On the nose. I'll take it. Fantastic. Thanks, everybody, for coming today to this Historic and Cultural Resources Focus Group. And the discussions to follow. Just a couple of quick heads up items. We are recording via the OWL to the Zoom environment. Looks like we'll have an attendant in just a moment. Attendee, I should say. That'll be observing alongside. We'll open it up for any public participation at the close of our discussion. The recording is really just for easy reference as you go through and compile your information following this meeting. But we'll also share this on the Master Plan Advisory Committee webpage here in town. I think we have just about everybody who we reached out to invite. Pat Odiorn was intended to come. She had a sudden conflict. So if there's anything that we want to reach out to her with afterwards, I'm happy to help facilitate that. And the same applies to, let's see, Michelle Hill, our town clerk, and David Sutton, Buildings and Grounds here in town. They're both unfortunately obligated elsewhere. We'll try to pop in as they can. But just kind of something to keep in back our minds if there's something you can follow up on afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Well, fantastic. I think we're bubbling away.
Great. Okay. Well, could we just go around and do introductions? I know you all know each other, but just get us talking. We'll start.
I'll start. John Goddard, Town Planner and Stormwater Coordinator for Southwick.
Lee Hamburg, Southwick Historical Society.
Linda McQuaid, Southwick Historical Commission.
Pat McMahon, Southwick Cultural Council.
Michael McMahon, Economic Development, and also with the Library Board of Trustees.
Marcus Phelps, Planning Board.
Kyle Fennell, Land Use Planner with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Lynn Blair, Southwick Library. Shannon Walsh, I'm the Historic Preservation Planner for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and I'm drafting the chapter for Historic and Cultural Resources for your plan.
I'm Scott Lehman, I am a business in town, Tiny Landscaping, and two businesses, and B Charles Real Estate Holding.
Okay, do we have anyone virtually?
Just a member of the public.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, thank you all for, I see a lot of you brought the questions in advance, so hopefully you had a chance to look at them. My last question is, do we have any other comments? So if there's anything that you feel that I missed in here, we can address that at the end, or you can email me after the fact and we'll make sure that it gets added to the conversation. These questions are based on other projects that I've done for municipalities on historic and cultural resource chapters. So that's how I started the formatting, but there's certainly, we can be flexible if there's more information that's needed. So we will start with the first one. We like to talk about what you as residents and people who live and work here know to be wonderful and unique and historic and culturally great about Southwick. So what would you say are the most important historic and cultural resources in Southwick? And locally significant is what we're looking at because that's what's most important. And it could relate to buildings, objects, structures, memorials, things like that, sites, cultural events such as fairs, whatever you feel that is unique and important to Southwick. And Kyle is going to take notes. Thank you, Kyle.
Can I start? I have notes.
Sure.
Nice.
What a girl.
Well, I just wrote them. We have a lot of historic things. We have some cultural resources. I think from my perspective, which is the Cultural Council, the art show we have an art show in the spring, which is very large and it draws in a lot of people. It's much more regionally in terms of supporting artists, but it is held here in Town Hall. And that's something the Cultural Council does itself. We also partner with other organizations and we partner with the Rotary to do the summer concert series. And the way the Cultural Council works, as I think most people here know, is we get grants from the state. So part of our supporting the town is going through the grants and supporting other organizations within town, which includes programs at the library, programs at the Historical Society. In terms of buildings, the one thing that is a personal, a personal thing that doesn't get used as much as I wish it did, which is the stage in our auditorium. We, several years ago refurbished that stage. So it's
That in
hand,
this building?
yes, it's handicap accessible. And it would be nice to see it used a little bit more.
Just to clarify, do you remember when that was renovated? Probably.
2000,
Somewhere between
10, 12.
2012 and 2014, somewhere
Yeah.
in that range.
There's actually a plaque
there is.
down in the lobby, front of the auditorium there, and had lists, people purchased.
Inches of the stage. That was a
Wow, just-
fundraiser that we
Oh,
did. We
that's
sold, we
Yeah.
sold inches of the
Mhm.
stage and they got a certificate. Yeah,
So there's a lot of names, there may be
There
a
are.
date, I don't know if there's a date on there.
yeah, I know. It was,
I think it was further back than that.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Are there
took-
any-
It took a while to do it. It took a while to get the money together because like many old buildings, once they got into it, the structure underneath needed a lot more support than was
How old is
anticipated.
this building?
1928.
20.
Is it,
It was built as a.
Not this
school.
part.
okay,
Yeah, not this add-on. It was built as, it was the school apparently up to.
The solid, yeah, the
Seventh or
historical
eighth
people
grade.
will know that.
People-
okay,
That's
oh,
what
that's
it is.
interesting, okay.
It was designed by Malcolm Bennett Harding, who was a
That's who
regional.
designed my
architect.
house,
Okay, I'm not surprised.
yeah,
Oh,
that's in Springfield. So is it, I'll have to walk around the entire building, is there any piece of the original?
The auditorium.
The
Wow.
front
Oh,
section
okay.
of the building, at least the exterior facade minus windows.
Okay, I'm gonna walk around the whole building before I leave. All right, so that's really interesting. Are there
Yeah.
any things
Yeah.
that are currently regularly in that space?
I don't believe so. The Historical Society probably uses it more than other, and they run programs there a lot.
Okay,
We originally, several years ago, had a small theater group, but that kind of due to lack of participation, getting
Lack of
people.
it.
Lack
Oh,
of
okay.
volunteers. It didn't last as long as we had hoped.
Mhm.
But I believe the scouts use it quite a bit too.
Okay,
But if you think back to how schools were in the 30s and 40s, they had that central auditorium that was kind of a basketball auditorium, but then it was everything else
the
under the sun.
gymatorium.
With a
The
stage at the end.
gym with the wooden floor, the wooden
That's-
floor is still there.
That's
Oh, okay.
what's still there. It's
Okay.
all, yeah,
So that piece of it is pretty intact.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah. So
that's
that,
great.
but and that's where the art show's held. The art show.
Okay. All right, thank you. Those are good examples. Okay, anybody else?
The other, I just thought of, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be talking
That's
too much.
okay.
I can tell.
No, the more information, the better.
The other group that I don't know if you've touched base with, it's a fairly new group, is the Civic Fund. And I was just thinking because of the Winter Forest that they just held at Town Hall in the auditorium.
Okay,
And they held a,
This is a local 501c3.
okay,
right. But
And they acquired property, the
Church.
Oh,
close
Methodist Church.
southwest of the Methodist Church on the south end of town.
oh, really?
Yeah, 222 College Highway.
Okay,
So that's now.
Built
South of Civic Fund.
1820,
That was my.
456.
Just feel your thunder, you got it, you got jump.
so that nonprofit just bought that building with the hopes to rehab it and use it
It's
as,
actually
Well, they're using-
granted, so I'm part of the Civic Fund. So it's granted to the Civic Fund.
okay,
The congregation, when closing, voted to gift it to the Civic Fund.
okay.
Didn't you have to pay $1 for it?
Technically bought it.
Yeah.
It was a dollar. So how many nails are in that building? So that building's gonna be used, so that the primary reason that we expressed interest in that was to make sure that we kept the food pantry alive and going.
Okay, because that was the home of the food pantry.
Correct.
Okay,
We are in the process of expanding the food pantry on that property, which is given a grant by the state to do so. We meet with the builder next week.
okay,
But the plan for the church building, is to keep it in its existing
Mhm.
state, continue to just keep it. So we didn't want to see it get torn down. and then that land repurposed. We're letting the town use it. Some of the police department, will be using a safe room there, and actually surrounding police departments will also be using that. Upstairs,
Sanctuary.
thank you. The sanctuary, it will stay intact. Music groups that go up there and use it, so it's going to use this community. Community meeting place.
This building would be
Okay.
perfect for a grant that we're trying to, if it was listed on the National Register. Does it have, is the exterior intact? Is it vinyl sided?
Aluminum
Aluminum
sided.
sided? Okay, well, there's something under that aluminum siding. Okay, well, that's,
There certainly is, and we
Yeah.
actually had some discussions yesterday about that.
okay, the reason this is jumping ahead to what I'm writing about, but Southwick only has one property listed on the National Register. National Register, as you may know, it's an honorary designation. It doesn't take controls away from property owners, but it can lead to really great opportunities for grant funding. In particular, there's Mass Historical Commission funds, which require a 50% match, which communities that have CPA take advantage of regularly. But the Mass Cultural Council also has an amazing, it's called a cultural facilities. I can't remember the exact name, but it has to do with
Cultural
cultural.
facilities fund.
Well, you would know because you're on the cultural council. So an example of this, Blandford also has one property listed on the National Register. It's the White Church. And that property just got $200,000 or $200,000 to paint the exterior. And Mass Cultural Council does systems grants. So it's something with the HVAC or there's a lot of really great things about having a National Register listing. So considering taking that aluminum siding off and trying to restore, there probably is funding for that. But particularly if that building is listed on the National Register, which the siding would have to come off
Sure.
to do that. So just something to think about, but that's a really exciting use of that space, reuse of that ecclesiastical space.
Continue.
3 buildings. You also have the Fellowship Hall, which
Fellowship Hall, Southwick, yeah, it's called the Southwick Meeting House now. Is what,
oh, that's what you're referring to as the Southwick Meeting House.
so I believe the Southwick Meeting House, yeah, then the actual church building, I'm not sure if it has a formal name or not, but, and then the open pantry. The open pantry, we're gonna move to the north side of the Fellowship Hall and Meeting House. Put a structure there.
I think the other thing I forgot to talk about when we're talking about sites is Wally Park, and Wally Park is a huge asset to the town. That's why we have our summer concert series. But that's,
And that, I'm not sure, I think this is under review right now, the technical papers that we turned in for chapters, but a previous plan, it's kind of hard to, there's not like a formal way to document cultural resources, like Mass Historic has the way that they do it. So a previous plan that I worked on in Westfield, I broke it down this way in that plan, so that's how I did it in this first draft, under cultural resources, recreational sites, which Wally Park is right in there, because everything I popped up, the fields and pavilions, Rotary Club Summer Concert Series, Mad Science Stage Show, and Reptile Shows of New England, because I looked at projects that your cultural council had funded. The Magic Show by the Southwick Council on Aging, they were all happening at Wally Park. So it's really apparent that that's a very important resource in addition to the public library. But I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, does anybody else have any?
I have
Yes,
me.
Yes,
We
Lee.
might have a few.
I might have a few. Certainly 20 Depot Street, the Laughlin Phelps House,
Mhm.
that's already on the National Register of
that's the
Historic
one.
Places,
And that's a private residence?
private
Yeah.
residence. The second place would be the Moore House at 86 College Highway. The third property,
Is that the Historical Society?
yes, owned by the Historical Society. The third would be the Southwick Congregational Church, which was designed by the same architect that designed the Blandford Meeting House,
Isaac,
Captain Isaac Damon of Northampton.
okay.
He also was the architect for the Methodist Church that you own, although it's not recorded in too many places accurately.
Okay,
However, you will not see any of the Damon-esque features at this point in time because of the aluminum siding And the fact that the upper section of the steeple went down during a storm in the 1890s, 1900.
Mhm.
And then the lower section was torn up about 1951 or two, I think.
Mhm.
So, believe it or not, there's still the timbers for the cupola section of the steeple. They were never taken down. They were simply slid into the attic. So they're
That's a
there
good thing
still.
if they're still there.
They're there still.
I know in Amherst, I think it's used by the Jewish Community Center of Amherst, the church in the East Village. Recently received CPA funds to do restoration work on the steeple.
A fourth site would be
Especially if you
the,
have CPA.
or building would be the old library. And that was designed by Augustus Holton.
What's the address? 'Cause I know you know it.
I don't know it.
I know.
478
475.
or 75.
I own it.
Okay.
I see.
Private.
No, it's business
Oh, okay. Oh, that's where your business is
at
located.
some point.
Okay.
And I would say that, those are probably the four most visually,
Mhm.
in your face historic buildings that we have in the community. That doesn't mean that there aren't others. You can go to, the gingerbread house on Depot Street. A handful of others,
Yeah,
Mhm.
but, that hits the real, the real peaks, I'm going to
Singular
say.
building, even if there's collections of buildings on a street, it's a streetscape that really looks really similar to what it did when it was first constructed. Those are important.
well, you
too.
can look down, portion of Depot,
Mhm.
the four corners of the intersection, and then south on College Highway. That's kind of,
Mhm.
And
Linda,
something,
did you had the brochure? Was that
I
a
did have,
historical commission one that
yes,
was?
I
Yeah.
brought the brochure.
Yeah.
and of course, you have copies of this on file, I'm sure.
Of this one?
Yes.
I don't know if I've seen this one. Is this?
It may be a
Extra?
rare item.
Can I?
No,
Oh,
it's
there's-
not a rare item.
We have, you have a
It's
few.
okay.
You have a few.
We have a few, you can
Oh,
keep it.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to add that you feel has been left out?
Yes, so I was not born in this town. My first trip here was about 30 years ago with a realtor.
Mhm.
And what struck me were, we already mentioned the Congregational Church, but the tobacco barns. And,
Yeah, sure.
is what stuck in my head.
What's left?
Mhm.
And anywhere, was it 668 College Highway? I have a property on Tannery Road across the street from that property. And yeah, it just struck me. I've lived in New England my entire life, never saw a tobacco barn,
Mhm.
so. struck
It's really unique to this right here in Agawam and even spilling over into Connecticut, and they are starting to disappear. Much.
Most
less
of
quickly.
them disappeared.
Yeah,
Look at the one where Amazon was located,
Right.
East
Yeah,
Granby.
Right.
most of them up there.
They're gone.
Days of, days of.
That was just mass extermination is all I can say.
yeah, the whole visual landscape lost there, scenic landscape. So the historical commission, though, within the past, like, within the 2000s, I think, did an updated survey. Is that right? That I noticed more barns were documented?
Yes, that was done with a consultant back around,
Like 2016, something.
it was, before that.
Yeah.
I want to say 2008
Okay.
or so,
Okay.
2009.
So Southwick does have, if we have time, I'll pull up so that you can see on Macris all the inventory points in Southwick. You can see the whole community is covered, but they're all blue dots.
Yeah.
And it's not a lot of areas, which is where you really get kind of a picture of context and only one red dot for the National Register. So documentation is good, if not just slightly dated, because I think Mass Historical Commission considers dated 2 years. So
I
very
did
hard to
an
keep up with
update a
that
couple of years ago and, I had to get rid of a lot of the blue dots,
because of demolitions and.
demolition, fire. And if you were to, color some of the blue dots light blue that have been altered over the years, the number goes down by
Mhm.
over
So the
50%.
blue dots show how many
Wow.
significant resources.
Oh,
were
yeah.
there. What Leah is saying is that the lack of protection or perhaps just monitoring or maybe public awareness or that it's maybe, and I will say this because the community survey, I think that over 700 of the respondents said in 20 years that keep the history of Southwick is really prominent in one of the ways that planning is done. So the history of this area is important. The built history is important. The age of the buildings that we're talking about really dates back to the 1700s, early 1800s, but there hasn't been a lot of protection. So whether by just people wanting to make changes or maybe lack of awareness over what that really means, there've been a lot of losses in those ways. So it's just something to think about as we're working on this chapter. Okay, tobacco barns was a very good point. Any other suggestions before we move on? Okay, so we've already talked about some inventory work that's been done, probably spurred on by the Historical Commission. But my next question is, what are some of Southwick's strengths and accomplishments related to saving, preserving, making the public aware of historic and cultural resources and programming?
And the brochure.
Okay, so, yep,
You didn't mention the Gillette Cigar Factory, which is down
I
by the
did.
Morehouse.
Well, yeah,
And that was a significant event,
That's.
Yeah.
somewhat challenging, but Community Preservation Act funds were used to relocate that building,
so that's a very good accomplishment.
the Gillette Cigar Factory,
Mhm.
which was at the corner of Congamon Road, Vining Hill, and College Highway.
And that's
Where the
near the Historical
CVS
Society building now?
It's on the
On the
land,
same-
yeah.
CVS was there.
I
Or
think
is
of it
there.
as being part of the same property.
Okay,
Um,
okay, that's a good one.
Other CPC funds, the church granted CPC funds for steeple this year.
No,
They were approved, that's kind of on hold at this point, but they were approved by the
Does it have to
CPC.
go to, has to go to town meeting?
Everything that CPC does has to go to town.
Yeah.
meeting. Yeah.
Is
So,
it
but
I
it-
thought they-
slated for the town meeting at this
Slated for
point, Jim?
No, not that I know of,
Oh,
but stay tuned. I mean,
yeah.
It should be.
I thought they had a
They approved
donation
it.
to do that.
well, that's why I don't want to say much, but stay tuned.
Is that one of the, an active
That's the
congregation?
congregational church.
Yeah.
Yes, it is an active congregation.
Okay,
Seems to me there must have been another CPA project.
Well, the old cemetery is one example, you know, the work that's been doing that,
Oh, the tree removal and,
trees and stone.
yeah,
No, just the preservation of the
Yeah.
stones.
yeah,
I mean,
the
that,
old cemetery.
That's primarily volunteer work, wasn't it?
I think so.
They got fun,
But they got
Yes,
some,
but
they
got
got some
some.
modest funding in the
Yeah.
big scheme of things. It's not
Yeah.
a tremendous amount.
I think when you're talking about the strings, I think the thing that, to me, because we've only been here 20 years, so we're fairly new, is the community support for things. And there really is a lot of community support to do things. And that is really nice.
well, just the fact that you've had CPA for so long. If, I think Southwick was one of the first towns I spoke with when I started in my job in 2017, and it was actually talking about the funds to document the canal. And I kind of assumed that every town also had CPA. You do have CPA, yes,
Yeah,
that every town had CPA. And then I realized that most towns don't in Western Mass have CPA and probably will not get passed. So the community support for making things great for everybody who lives here is even evident just by that having been passed so long ago.
Well, and even back to the cultural council, which is my world. We have a line item in the town budget. We don't get a huge amount, we get a small amount. But it helps. And many cities and towns in the state of Massachusetts do not have that. They're dependent solely on what the state gives them.
That's
And
great.
that's it. So that's. No, we've had a lot of support.
Any other comments? Okay, so the flip side of that, what are the primary concerns and challenges for the protection and continued use of Southwick's historic and cultural resources and programming?
Just keeping people aware. I mean, you know, we really focus on that at the library with programs, and we're hoping to kind of branch out into doing stuff for more of all ages. So that, you know, the younger generations know and appreciate our resources. And we have some great resources and we have some great people. Like, I mean, you call Pat Odiorn and she knows everything. And like Lee is just putting us to shame with the dates over here.
So
It's
you have a
amazing.
strong volunteer.
Strong
role in the-
volunteer, you know, strong
Yeah.
knowledge base, you know, we need to keep the enthusiasm going for future generations is really
Lee's
important.
name should be under number one. Something we need to preserve.
Yes, I agree with that.
I'll give you a hint. I ain't gonna be around forever.
We need 20 years, Lee.
Does with the library programming, do you have any struggles for space or venues or?
Necessarily space because, you know, we have a meeting room that fits about 40 and, you know, we've
Okay.
done things in the stage before. If we
Okay.
need to go
Right.
So
bigger.
sometimes you can use this. space
Yeah,
too.
oh,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah,
That's
so it's not, so, you know, sometimes it's just finding people to present, finding
Mhm.
funds for presentations to bring people in, things like that.
It's just sometimes the challenges of money, it's like
Mm.
the old library was built in 1892.
Or
The town considered, should we tear it down or can we give it away? They finally put it out for public bid. And this man says, I'll give you $12,000 plus some change. I'll take the building. Because the town said, we don't, I won't say want,
We can't support that.
we won't spend the money. Because the town budget, as with a lot of the small towns,
Right.
50% of the budget goes to the schools on July 1st.
Mhm.
Then it's police, fire, and DPW. The crumbs are left for everything
Right,
else.
which are all important things that people obviously have a right to be concerned with, yes. So what
So-
happened to that building? So.
He
Oh,
bought
that's
it
the
for
same
$12,000.
building.
so $170,000 later. I'm-
That's-
Long story short.
Gotcha, Okay,
But
A lot of work.
it has been, but we're trying to historically do it correct with
great,
guidance.
well, that's the,
But I don't know. if
that will
this-
be a trigger there to have that kept.
I don't know if this is the right response for question 3, but I was thinking about this earlier today. When we talk about education, you know, as a business owner and now the steward of this property, when I first got it. And when somebody mentioned, hey, we should get this registered, National Registry, and I'm like, oh, then I'm not gonna be able to use galvanized nail or whatever the case may be. So I was uneducated
Mhm.
in
Yes,
that restoration. So I think educating people that own existing potentially cultural, historic
Mhm.
buildings need to be educated as that it's not a bad thing.
yes,
It could be a great.
Yeah.
it could be a great thing. That's in here somewhere in my chapter. Because that's a common thing, feeling that you're gonna lose property rights. But if you do have a grant, then there are certainly strings that go along with that. For example, maybe a preservation restriction, but it's protecting the investment. But just National Register listing, it's an honorary designation. Buildings get torn down all the time that are in National Register districts. If there's state or federal funds or state or federal permitting that's going to be along with the project, then there's a review process required. But sometimes it's just mitigation, like maybe we could go around the building, or maybe we'll tear the building down, but we'll document it first. So, but yes, that is definitely an important point to make sure that it's, the community understands what these things mean and not that you'd maybe lose property rights because of it.
It's out there as being scary.
Yeah.
Just as an example, when 20 Depot Street came up for sale, the designation was not mentioned in the
Was not?
ad. And it was actually stated in the ad that while this is an American history property or whatever, it was actually stated in the ad that this is not in a historical district and you can do anything you want to the property.
Mhm.
That was actually stated in the ad.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of.
So there is, there is that pushback from,
Mhm.
either realtors or property owners that saying, I can't I can't get,
And
what
I've
I
seen some
want my property
communities
is
where
worth.
maybe on the town, the historical commission page on the website has that information. Mass Historical Commission has put together pamphlets and brochures about there's a difference between a local historic district. which
Yes,
Does,
I've seen
is
that.
under ordinance or bylaw and does have certain controls which are decided upon public hearing. Everybody gets to the same place, but National Register does not have that. So that will be something that I'll make clear in this chapter too, along with thoughts about how it can become more easily accessible to the public for future consideration.
And to take away the scariness of saying that.
Yeah,
Because I think that those words in the ad just perpetuated that scariness.
right.
I think another thing is that it is so easy to call in the vinyl siding contractor and
Yes.
thermal sash
Mhm.
window, man, and have him, ta-da, in a few weeks' time, and it's done. And you don't have to worry about anything for the next, 10, 20, 30 years. And and I don't have to maintain it, and it's pretty.
Mhm.
Well, and for private property, that becomes an important consideration.
Mhm.
People aren't necessarily investing in their property because of the historical significance of it. They're investing in it because it's their home.
Mhm.
And if they can get siding on it that makes it warmer in the winter, windows that make it warmer and cheaper for energy, and there's no official designation,
Mhm.
chances are they're gonna do that.
Right. Right. And that's
Now-
all, and then the one thing about siding is what started there is typically underneath, and even the city of Cambridge, they have a program for rehabilitation through their CPA money that you could restore the exterior by taking off the siding and restoring the clapboard or shingles, so different from replacement windows, at least the siding is still there. So that's one way, but yeah, there's a lot of different factors,
Well, there's
energy
that
efficiency
tension.
and,
There's always the tension between private ownership
right.
and the greater kind of public need.
Mhm. And National Register districts are really made up of all the pieces of it make up a whole, so they can include buildings that have vinyl siding. Individual districts really have to be in very, very good condition to be significant, but yeah, there's a lot of factors to consider.
But what all of this illustrates, and it's a major issue, and I just want to kind of, build on what Pat said. Let's go back to the tobacco barns. I don't think you'd find anybody in town that doesn't love the tobacco barns and want to preserve them and everything. Those are owned by, I'm gonna say 20 landowners, maybe. Might be, 5 or 10 off one way or the other, but, and so, the kind of the knee-jerk reaction is we gotta preserve them all. Well, if you're an owner of one of those and you're not putting tobacco in it, that building's a liability. And at some point, your insurance company, first of all, and I hate to, take away from the romanticism, but those barns, if you don't use them, you lose them. And they start deteriorating pretty much the first year you don't use them. They're well built, but they do come down from a variety of causes. At some point, your insurance company tells you, you've got a dilapidated structure on your property, gotta get rid of it. But that's the tension in town, is we all want to preserve these things. But if you're the owner of it, Scott aside, most people are gonna say, that thing's gotta come down, or I'm gonna sell it for another use.
So should we be educating people about CPC, right?
Mhm.
And the historical preservation bucket that's available? And I know we've had some challenges with those funds being used for private businesses,
Yeah.
say businesses,
Well,
right?
I want to talk about that at some point too, Scott, because I think that's a very fertile topic here.
But let's take businesses off the table though, but if the townspeople want to see those tobacco barns, shouldn't that would lead itself to a positive vote and town, at the town meeting, where if everybody agrees that we as Southwick are known for our tobacco barns, then well, let's put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
And let's nominate them for funds.
And it's the same thing with, you know, the, whatever it is, 10 Depot Street. If you're the owner of that house, it's all well and fine that everybody loves to look at it and it's got, you know, historical significance and so forth, but, again, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, let's just tell them to, you know, they can't put vinyl siding on it. You know, that's where the crunch comes here.
The-
I got
the-
another issue I want to throw out here before we spend all our time on
Wait,
that.
can I stop you real
Yeah,
quick? So would it
absolutely.
be useful then in this section of the plan to maybe highlight models of barn reuse? Because as you're saying, if a barn is vacant and doesn't have a use, it's gonna deteriorate. That's true of really any building. So there are programs, stronger programs in other states. Connecticut did a whole barn survey through their Connecticut Trust. There's a National Barn Alliance. There's different programs that we might be able to point to for that.
Absolutely.
And then also the private CPC funds for private
Property.
property. It's something that is dealt with across the state and every community handles it differently. It is eligible if the
If the voters vote for it.
if the voters vote for it, and
It
if
has
the
to meet a
committee
public.
feels that there's a
right,
public benefit,
benefit.
which a scenic vista that is really relates directly to the town character, could fall into that category. So that might be something useful to highlight in this chapter as well. And if we're talking about the survey respondents saying that in 20 years, we want to make sure that this town is really focused on preserving the history of Southwick, and those barns as the backdrop are part of it, then that could be something that should really be put to the forefront of what should be talked about. Like, how can we support these barn owners? Not that they want to demolish the barns, but they don't have a lot of choices. So it could be something that we should talk about. Does that sound a plan? Yes. Okay.
They certainly are a defining characteristic of the landscape here
Right.
in eastern Southwick. It's, that's another issue, but, you know, the tobacco was pretty much all east of the highway here.
I'm sorry, you said there was one other thing you wanted.
Yeah, so, you know, and I appreciate all the positivity here. But I think when you talk about cultural and historical and recreational resources, and I don't think we're any different in this respect than most other small towns, but the community infrastructure to support ongoing activities, let alone projects, has been deteriorating for most of my adult lifetime. And so I look around, you know, the Methodist Church dissolved. You can say, well, that was a denominational thing, but no, it was a long, slow decline. People don't go to mainline Protestant churches anymore. I think the Roman Catholics have the same challenge, but our congregation across the street here is, you know, really down to about 50 active members. And that was 200 back when I was growing up. And so, you know, their ability to support that infrastructure was substantial. Another example, I'm on something called the Southwick Dollars for Scholars group, and that group is all but dead. And nobody will come out and help us with it. I don't know why I stay there, but, you know, it's out of orneriness, I guess. But, you know, we got a new, you know, I call her a young woman, and she keeps reminding me, well, her kids are all grown up and out of high school, so she's not that young. But, you know, and so there's a group that's, I think, dying. The Southwick Recreation Center. 30 years ago, there were dozens and dozens of people who volunteered over there. They were coaching, they were reffing, they were selling hot dogs at the stand. Gone. You know, I mean, it's still there, but they're
So
struggling.
is that that's not Southwick Parks and Rec, is it?
No, that's
No,
Southwick
it's-
Recreation Center.
It's a nonprofit.
But what I'm saying is that the, you know, community infrastructure, Lee, the Historical Society, I mean, you guys are strapped.
I mean, it's an
and-
aging population
And,
that's trying to do more and more with less and less.
and, you know,
As far as
so
manpower.
kudos to what they did, you know, 40 years ago, acquiring the Moore House and then, you know, getting partnering with the town. But, you know, I would challenge you, if something like that came up now, would the Historical Society be able to pull that off? That's not fair to me, you know, but it'd be a
It'd be
challenge.
a real challenge.
And so we're kind of, you know, and I think I'm probably stating the obvious and making things complicated. But then we're back to, well, the only alternative on things is to go to the CPC for funding. And that's a limited bucket too, and that's heavily politicized. You know, nobody wants to say that, but that's a, you know,
It is what it is.
I'm
It is.
embarrassed by how politicized that thing is. It should never have become that way.
Mhm.
But, you know, certain people, certain projects get boatloads of money.
Mhm.
And then when other things come up, and Scott can just be quiet, but when his project came up for what, $15,000, got voted down by one vote. It's crazy. They spend $1 million for baseball fields, but 15,000 for.
Stained glass.
There is a
Stained glass, yeah.
requirement though for a percentage being spent on preservation. There's percentages.
Oh, I understand that, but we've
Yeah.
been very generous with certain projects and very with other projects.
Well, I think the other thing you touched on, which is a challenge for the future. And the Friends of the Library are facing this challenge. Every group I'm involved in is facing this. We need younger people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People are.
What's the median age here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
It used
Most
to
of
be,
us are over the age of 50.
Scott's bringing it down.
Thank you, Scott. And Lynn's helping us out. here,
Yeah, Lynn,
too.
you know,
You know,
but it used to, in my starry-eyed world, it used to be people retired and they looked for things to do and ways to get involved in the community. It appears now there's a lot of people retiring
Mhm.
and they're traveling and there's
Yeah.
nothing against them, but they're very wrapped up in their own world and they're not volunteering. So as we as a group age, there's physically, you just can't do things and then you feel bad because you see things that need to be
Well,
done.
and you're volunteers too, so
Yes.
Yeah.
there's only so
But
much.
the population is increasing. There's a lot of young
Okay.
families. But they're kind of making demands on the town, but they're not participating in
It's a
it.
bedroom
It's
community.
much bigger than that.
Mhm.
American society has
Right.
changed over
Yeah.
the last
yeah,
20,
that's why I
30,
say it's not
40
a
years.
Southwick issue,
Mhm.
but it
Right,
it does
And it's right,
impact
echoing
all
in
these
every
nice
community.
things that we would like to do.
Right.
Right.
And we have become much more a bedroom community. People work
They work in
somewhere else.
Springfield, they
Yeah.
work in the
Hartford.
Winters, they work in
Yeah.
Hartford, or they work totally remote and their employer could be 3,000 miles away.
okay.
But
So
they're
that's
not
definitely
part
something
of-
we need to highlight, attracting volunteers
Yeah.
who are interested.
The average age of the Historical Society when it was, let's say 1975, shortly after it was formed. It was created 1971. I'm gonna guess and say the average age was about 45 to 50.
Mhm.
And the majority of the members were couples, husband and wife.
Mhm.
And how many men do we have on our entire roster now? Yeah, 5. And I'm one of the youngest and I've retired.
You were in 1975 too, right? So you kept your role.
well, Rob is helping us out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We did get a young couple and their family start to be very active, and I'm thinking, there's our new president, there's our new vice president. Yeah.
But
It's interesting that there's, like Jim is saying, this community engagement we have subdivisions that are just, they sit out there, you know, $400,000 to $600,000 homes. I think the people are very busy working, just try to pay the mortgage. They don't have time to do other things. I don't know what they're doing, what their interests are. I
They-
mean,
they-
hopefully they were part of the 900 that completed the
Right, I mean, we
survey.
already have a model for reaching these people. That's insane that you got that many people to respond. It really is
It's just-
amazing.
People.
So
live
you have
here.
people's ear, and at this point now, we have to figure out how to keep it.
People moved here for the newer houses. They work elsewhere. I can say some of my neighbors, one says, I'm interested in what goes on at the Windsors because he works in the Windsors. My wife is involved with education in the Farmington River Valley. We don't read a local paper. We have no idea what goes on in town.
Okay,
And I think a lot of our neighbors
Yeah.
are that way. And again, it's not anything against anyone, it's just their focus is
factor.
somewhere else.
yep,
Again, I'm being very cynical with you, but otherwise there's really no purpose for me to be here, but.
Oh, well, you used to work in Connecticut.
It's not a matter of reaching these people. They're out there and if we ever wondered whether they had a viewpoint or were action oriented, when we had the thing with the Carvana a couple of years ago, they're out there and they're very aware and they have a strong opinion and I suspect a lot of them responded to your survey. So it's not, just saying, well, we got to reach them or we got to educate them or something. I don't think that's.
You want to put a cell tower on our neighborhood?
Yeah, absolutely.
Also,
They'll
the
be
planning
organized.
board had
That's a
150
great, that's a
people
great example.
wow,
You
on
know,
the
they're
phone saying,
on Facebook.
Verizon, go away.
right.
They're on Facebook complaining about the cell coverage. But put a cell tower out behind, on town property out behind. So, enough of that. I just wanted to get that issue out because
There are
I
a
think
few
it's a,
I have to
controversial
say
items.
that a previous cell tower is what's paying for the canal documentation though.
yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Sometimes things work out.
Courtesy of the Historical Society and the Historical
But
Commission.
Isn't, and I'm not, I participated in the survey and I, read whatever I see online about your project, but isn't that ultimately, what the town needs to do is we gotta balance all these different things.
Sure,
I love every square acre of farmland in this town. But I'm realistic enough to think that not all of it's gonna survive as farmland. That some of that's going to get developed to other purposes. This has been going on for I'm gonna say 200 years in this town,
Yeah.
Lee, but we could probably debate that, but
well,
it's part of the
progress
process.
or
Yeah.
process happens. The point of this is the mitigation.
Yeah,
So that
absolutely.
things change, but they change in a way that is best for
It's,
the majority, at least, of the community, or the people who respond to surveys or things like that. So none of this chapter is about stopping progress, discouraging development,
Right.
discouraging alterations. It's everything that I do always starts with, let's figure out what you have. What are your assets? And then let's figure out, are things gonna happen? Okay, if something's gonna happen, let's look at what is the best, like the highest and best use, what is the best way to proceed? It's kind of about mitigation, but it all starts with understanding what is there and what is valued. And if there's things that are valued that once they're gone, it's really gonna actually be a huge loss to Southwick. What should be done or what could be done to try to stop that and to try to support people who own barns or who own historic churches that are going to be used as community spaces, so that they could stay for the community, but also support the community. So that's it. I'm not here to say everything must stay the same.
Oh, right.
Nothing can change. It's just kind of having a dialogue
And
about
I
all
think
of it.
exploring reuse is helpful because,
Yeah.
I mean, the planning term is adaptive reuse.
Mhm.
And there's some buildings, old homes in town here that have been adapted.
Mhm.
They're office space now. There's one that was chopped up into apartments, the Fletcher House, and it's
Mhm.
just sitting there. And because it hasn't been used for over a year, it is now a single family home. And it can't be used as an apartment again. So
What house is
what's gonna
that?
happen to it? Fletcher House on the corner of
Okay,
Depot and Sheep Pasture. I don't know how
Yeah,
many
that-
apartments they have.
And almost is only got one family, that's what I was.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
it's been, that use has been abandoned
Okay,
because it's been not used as an apartment.
well, it
for a
only
year.
had one unit in it.
Oh, no. It had, that you knew of, no. No, it had at least at least, I think, 3 residents possibly.
But yes, adaptive reuse is
but-
is a good,
We need,
be a
you know,
good
we
thing.
need to think about how do these places, how are they useful
yeah,
to get, you know?
because the
If we
win with
get some
that is that
examples
you
of other
still,
towns.
Yeah.
I mean, who has adapted a cigar or a tobacco barn?
I'm gonna
What
look
are,
into that.
you know what I mean?
'Cause now I'm
What
curious.
can
For
the
real
tobacco barn
reuse,
be
yeah.
used for?
Yeah.
Reused for?
Right.
I don't know.
But it is on private property. so-
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Storage, boats, campers, we have plenty of need for that stuff here in town.
Mhm.
So that I think creatively we could come up with that specific example, but for the Fletcher House. What's the lesser of the two evils? Somebody completely abandons maintaining that property or allowing it to become a multifamily property. That's a decision I wouldn't want to have to make.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a tough one because there's outbuildings too.
Yep.
There was a electronic store there, radio TV repair, which is separate from the old historical building. So how do you deal with that? Fortunately or unfortunately,
But
planning board will probably have to deal with it.
staying on Depot, I assume, given the approval for the condos on the Malone property, that house will be gone.
Yeah,
That house
all
will be
those
torn down,
buildings will be torn down, yeah.
which will completely change that corner.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's the loss. So there's communities that struggle with this everywhere, but maybe if it's a very large property and it's subdivided, that maybe condos can go in one space, but the actual house is carved out, so it stays for the entire community to keep that.
Well,
They tried that for
Not
Dunkin'
that
Donuts.
sample, but I'm
Yeah,
saying,
not that example.
not that
No, but
example.
that's a great example, but that's where we would need planning board to
Right.
hear and accept, what's the term I'm looking for, an assessment, allow them to break the rules.
Well, variance.
Oh, variance, right.
Allow more easily
Right.
the branch to be done. That's a perfect.
Basically what
Right,
it
and
is.
the state has a listserv for historic preservation, so I get emails all day long and I'll see conversations about that type of thing where there's a large residence, there's a big property, maybe outbuildings are there or gone, someone wants to buy it, demolish it, but because there was something at some point done where the historical commission had some sort of like a seat at the table, there's a conversation about it, instead of it being a foregone conclusion that it's gone.
Coming down.
Maybe it's in a local historic district, maybe it's a National Register property. I think Long Meadow they have just one National Register district, but they have a list of, and maybe even Westfield, they have a list of properties that if this property, if there's something proposed to be done, you have to go talk to the historical commission first to have their, kind of feedback on it, and then the planning board or whoever's deciding gets their comments. So that's just the point of figuring out what is most important, what remains. It's most of the dark blue dots and maybe some of the light blue dots, what remains, because you have to decide, do we want to have a conversation if someone's proposing demolishing this? Or do we not? And that's kind of what it comes down to, depending upon who it is, and because there's no protections. There's no say in it really, except for maybe right at the planning board level. So just something to think about.
The carrot always works better than the stick. You provide funds and people do anything that you ask of them typically.
Mhm. Yep. That's.
I mean, the average
incentivizing.
person doesn't, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was agreeing, saying incentivizing things.
University of Vermont did a study some years back. And they said that the average thermal sash only saves $1 per window for a heating season versus a properly, maintained you know, historic window
You'll
with a
have to replace
storm,
them in 10 to 15 years.
with a storm window on it.
Yeah.
I mean, think. So if you have 30 windows, you're gonna save $30, but it's going to cost you, you know, $1,000 each,
Mhm.
you know, to
Yep,
have to
That's
buy.
a whole other conversation, Lee. I agree with you, as I do housing rehab all day long, but that's a whole,
Lee and I have
Conversation.
that, Lee and I have that conversation, but it goes back to education, because
yes,
I'm thinking, you know, everything that's been pumped into our heads, even as a guy
Right.
that's built a handful of houses,
right.
thinking that my vinyl windows are gonna do
And
it.
from realtors.
In realtors, and then Lee came out and we walked around, he talked, and we went through that, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And you know, when you start, and then you look at it economically, purchase the window, replace it in 10, 15 to 20 years. All this plastic. everything into the
There-
plug.
there's-
It was
There's no
no-brainer.
payoff
And that
at
goes in the
all.
landfill, then the new windows go in the landfill, and then, right, all the glass that's having to be, yes, it's very, yes. There is, the state of Connecticut has a deconstruction ordinance on their website that I've shared with some communities as something that would potentially, you know, just something to think about for the future as we talk about reducing what we're putting in landfills and maybe being more thoughtful about the way that we rehabilitate buildings. Connecticut's already doing it. They have a deconstruction ordinance. Connecticut Trust has a model ordinance, and communities across the country are starting to put this into their law so that they can say, not just like a demolition delay, but okay, you have to, these things that you deconstruct from your building, you have to donate them, you have to preserve them. So there are starting to be conversations about that, which would maybe slow down throwing out 150-year-old windows to replace them with windows that are only gonna last 10 plus years and actually don't save that much money. Another topic, okay, so this is kind of a different question than what we've been talking about. Are there ways that Southwick could be more inclusive or equitable related to historic and cultural sites and programmings?
Yes.
Yes.
Next question.
Well, in my fantasy world, we have a park out here, it's called Prifty Park, and right now there's volleyball courts in it, and that's about it, right?
Basketball.
Prifty Park, basketball.
Benches, yeah.
And to me, that's a perfect place to put like a senior exercise track that they have specific things. So there's things like that, or we have that's been in process for I don't know how long, the ramp to get down to the swamp. John Westcott started it. I don't think it ever got finished. It was to be a handicap ramp to get down into wetlands. Sounds better than swamp.
Yeah.
So that they could be educated on what a wetlands is, what grows there, and that kind of thing. He started it with the Boy Scouts. I don't know if that ever got finished. I know
It didn't, they ran into some issues and I don't remember what it was. But certainly it'd be well worth resurrecting it since we have a very capable buildings and grounds
Yes, we
person
do.
now.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be a ways out on the agenda.
Right.
But
It could be something in an
Yeah.
opportunities section
Yeah.
of this plan though, that is
But-
called out.
accommodating the seniors would be would be something of interest because
At this.
we have an
point,
aging population and.
We do.
20% of the population is over the age of 65.
Yeah. And
Well,
they're-
you know, I'll throw my personal support on that, and, they.
Oh, I'm not
they-
taking on a project.
The high school, no, I'm not taking on the project, but you know, the high school track is an outstanding facility. And was well used by the town population, but during the day it was heavy to seniors. And this fall, and rightfully so, I fully support this, because I'd be walking around out there and I say, you know, from a safe school standpoint, it makes no sense that, you know, anybody can come in here in the middle of everything and walk around during the day. So they restricted the hours. So it's not open until 4 o'clock on school days, which really took that
But
away from the
before
seniors.
7, I'm out there at 6:30.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Yes.
in the morning. I
In the
take-
morning.
Yeah, good for you.
Yes. before-
But, you
before
know,
they
there,
close it up,
but, you know, especially for women, there's a safety issue.
Yeah.
My wife gets sore with me when I'm over there in the dark, but other end of the day, and she says that's not safe, but,
I'm with someone, yeah.
but, you know, something here in the middle of town where a lot of the seniors are concentrated, the
Being the
senior
senior
center,
center,
that's to me, that would be a home run, Pat.
Yeah, that sounds
I
good.
think it would, I mean, they have them with different stations, where
Yeah.
literally it's equipment and
Yeah.
people could, because the more we can keep, and I'm not real good at this, the more we can keep seniors healthy
Yeah.
and physically active, the less expensive it's going to be, both for them and society. And so I just,
Is there any historical significance to Prifty Park that?
other
No.
than Prifty donated it.
No, he didn't
Yeah.
donate it.
It's just named after him.
No, that was a nursery when we were going to school here, by an old family. That wasn't town
Mhm.
property until, you know, probably the 1970s.
So a family involved in agriculture from
No.
Southwick.
Well, the family, it's not named after the family that,
No.
you know,
Oh, no.
used it.
No.
Griffins were the people who operated the nursery
Okay.
at the, was that part of the, Gillette, complex, or I don't?
No, but the daughter that became Holcomb was from the
Okay,
Gillett family.
Okay,
Oh,
It's pronounced Gillett in this
But-
neck of the woods.
but that's,
Just learned something. Feel so in the know.
but it is an
Right.
underutilized piece of
Well,
real
you know,
estate in the
because
center of
we
town.
got
I
this-
think that's a fair,
There's a nice
very
little
fair.
playground down here.
Mhm.
And
Well,
right
the
adjacent-
playscape gets used.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
the
that
playscape-
gets used a lot.
it's used a lot.
And
but-
adjacent to that, you could do a fitness track.
Yeah.
I mean. Could be built for handicap and seniors, but anybody could use it,
And
you
they-
know.
And they
and-
could come over
What
here
is
for
the,
lunch.
what is the center of Southwick? Is it this building?
Yeah.
No, I would say.
I consider,
more than-
I consider the four
Inside.
corners the
The four
center.
corners,
The four
yeah.
corners?
Where the memorial is here, which
Yeah.
was
Congregational church.
just
Yeah.
wonderfully
Yeah, no,
restored
that's
and,
beautiful.
and that's another item we should mention is, I don't know what it's called. It's not War Memorial, it's just something.
Town
memorial.
I
common.
call
Yeah,
it,
it
I
is
call it the Veterans, Memorial.
Veteran,
Yeah,
Veterans Memorial.
yeah, I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
is.
So this is the
Yeah,
town common?
That's the center.
No, you.
Yeah.
We don't really have a
Right,
town
right to to the south of the Congregational Church.
Okay, so that, talking about people who, and this is again a bigger conversation, but people who live here but don't, they go to other places to do things. I think as things like that are more defined, like a town center,
Mhm.
a senior workout area. I know people go to the canal walk where it leads into Connecticut because it's a defined space. I think as these types of space, there will be less reasons for people who live here to go to other places. And more reasons for them, the community center, the park with all the concerts and things, they won't have to go, because I live in Springfield and I know I go to a lot of other places to do things. The more reasons you have to stay in your own community, including those defined spaces, I think those are the types of things, and especially if they're accessible. Are the cultural events like the concert or the art show, do you ever have any, well, I guess in this building, no, because there's an elevator and the auditorium. Are there any things programming that people maybe wouldn't be able to access easily?
No, the summer concerts are at Wally Park in an open pavilion.
Yeah.
And it's
And-
very,
and
it's
it
very
is-
accessible.
Accessible.
And this building is completely accessible. So,
Okay.
no,
Yeah, I
no.
think there's a heightened awareness of the ADA
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
requirements, so we are sensitive to
Okay,
that side of things.
We have a boat or a fishing pier
Mhm.
that's built for
wow.
handicap accessibility. Which is a wonderful
That's beautiful.
resource, sticks right out into Middle Pond. And when you were talking about the swamp walk down here, Marcus, I've got a beautiful swamp walk behind my house on the New England Trail. With a floating bog bridge that I think, you know, is, my understanding is really a unique resource. And that was, made handicap accessible up to the point of the bridge here, with town funding, or CPC funding,
okay.
3 or 4 years ago.
Is
So-
there access to the New
Medica-
England Trail?
But it is the New England Trail.
Yes,
Okay.
just to
Public
the
access.
east of his home.
Okay,
Rising Corner.
right on the boundary between us and West Suffield and Feeding Hills.
Okay,
Runs right along the ridge line.
and that's controlled by the National Park Service now.
No,
I think. Or
uh,
doesn't the Springfield Armory have something to do with the?
No.
Yeah, they're gonna acquire, they're gonna acquire.
It may, but you know, it's a, I forget the designation, it's a national historic or there's some terminology that means it's kind of a like an Appalachian Trail in the development because
But all
there's-
the land is privately owned.
there's still a lot of privately owned land. The land next to my, next to and behind my house is owned by the town of Southwick. And controlled by the Conservation Commission, but the, Western Mass Trail Club maintains it.
Okay, are people aware of that access? Do they come to use it?
Yeah, you're quite a few people.
I tell you, the last few years, since the lockdown in 2020, the usage of that's grown,
Oh, I bet.
immensely.
Because we go by and see the
Yeah.
cars parked.
We give the 3 or 4
Yeah,
or 5.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there are days in
Good
this,
parking area.
what's that?
It's a good parking.
Yeah,
Is that the-
not right now, Marcus, but.
Oh, it's a little spongy?
Little spongy down there, but,
This to the left of 7. There's a row of arborvitae right there. Is that?
yeah,
parking
yeah,
area?
yeah.
Which way is the trail, north or south?
Goes
Yes.
north and south, yeah, goes all the way to, goes all the way to Long Island Sound and to Mount Monadnock. To the north and
Mhm.
it's a good trail. I mean, it goes pretty much, aside from the little gap there at Rising Corner, it pretty much follows the ridge lines.
Groven Mountain.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the rail trail is 6.5 miles long in town. It goes all the way to New Haven
Right.
and heads
Connect.
north up toward Vermont.
Okay. And the rail trail, and I know the Southwick Historical Society has been instrumental in doing the signs and trying to get the signs in other communities, because I've been at
Yeah.
historical commission meetings in other communities where there's been talks about, we have a sign, if you can help us get it into the ground in your community, which I think is really great. And I drive by one on Root Road in Westfield.
Okay,
Are there any other places in Southwick, like rail trail type or public places where there are signs? Not wayfinding signs, but signs that, or an opportunity to put signs to share the history of Southwick with people, community spaces, or,
Probably that
Well,
Sofinowski.
Sofinowski, I was just gonna
Right.
say that, because that has trails and.
Do they have a board there, I think.
They do
They
have
do.
a
They do
board,
up front, yeah,
yeah,
with a map and so forth.
yeah.
like East Hampton's rail trail area. They have signs along the way that talk about what was there. Also because things are not there anymore. So sometimes when things are not there anymore, it's at least one way to kind of connect the community to the history. East Longmeadow also, their short rail trail, which goes right through an industrial area. They have signs, which I think is a nice way to try to bring that historic cultural awareness to the community.
I think our rail trail is pretty well marked. I mean, I don't, personally, I don't want to see a sign every 200 feet.
Well, maybe not that, but maybe there's
but-
examples of
But
other
there's
places.
down by the canal section there's a sign there explaining the canals. You know, a lot of it went through kind of the, out of sight, out of mind part of Southwick. I mean, they dug out half of it and used it to fill in the other half. So a lot of it's kind of, you're walking in a tunnel.
But there's a nice sign by Depot.
A nice sign there,
Depot.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's signage, maybe on the Westfield side up there, but no, there is signage there.
Yeah, there's another one right off of Feeding Hills Road.
Yeah.
Isn't there a sign right there?
And it's out Long Yard where the canal went through.
So shifting to talking about maybe collections, archival material. Are there any concerns about, like, I've worked in some towns where maybe a lot of their town records were in the basement of their town hall, and there was mildew, dampness issues.
One of the things the town clerk did here 6 or 8 years ago, she got CPC funds
Mhm.
to take a lot of their paper documents and put them on microfilm
Okay,
So she had two sets of various documents going back to the 1700s or whatever.
oh, wow, okay,
So that she has a copy in the vault, and there's another copy in another town building
oh,
in town. So in case
That's
town
awesome.
hall burned down.
Mhm.
there's another
very,
set
very,
like
okay,
it.
so she's way ahead of the curve on that,
Yeah,
okay,
the documents were also conserved by, I forget what corporation.
Mhm.
Basically, they were deacidified where necessary and put in Mylar,
okay.
sleeves and
Southwick
then
is ahead.
rebound. But,
Are there other collections?
the Historical Society is.
Society?
Yeah,
It does the Historical Society, because some community like Blandford, the library also actually has a large collection and their Historical Society, so
Yeah.
both,
The library has a collection,
We
various
need a collection.
books, etc.
okay, the
But-
original books and,
But it would. be
But that's
nice to-
where the rubber meets the road on the issue that I raised before, so, there's a tremendous collection of just stuff that's been donated to the Historical Society.
Mhm.
And unless Lee lives another 140 years, he's not gonna be able to archive it all. Just ain't gonna happen, and, talk, and then, it'd be one thing, and maybe you have been through all of that, Lee, but it'd be one thing to get through all of it, it'd be another thing to properly preserve it and everything. And so here you have a volunteer group that's aging, that, doesn't have the
I think we
resources.
can stop saying how old we all are.
Doesn't have the resources to,
Yeah, there should be a good discussion of that
Mhm.
because the society has
We probably have the equivalent,
several filing cabinets
Yeah.
of
it's a treasure trove.
material.
we have
That
probably the equivalent of almost 100 bankers' boxes of records and
Okay.
documents and materials that are basically unprocessed at this point in time.
Okay,
And,
they're
and you
stored-
ask me,
They are
can you?
stored in a fairly dry location
Yeah,
in
But
the
not a-
cigar factory.
but they,
They're not in a basement
But
somewhere.
not a greatly secure location.
no.
I mean, I worry about that too, and, it's just.
Fire is a major hazard.
Yeah.
Not flood. Fire would,
I mean,
Wipe
can
it
they
out.
be digitized? Are they handwritten? Can we transcribe them? Like what can we do?
Yes, and
to
yes, and
kind of-
yes,
Yes.
but all that costs money, I mean.
and time.
And time, yeah.
well, I think so the goal of this will go back to that, what do we have here? So putting in this, what do we have? Where is it located? Who is in control of it? What are the needs? The primary need is to go through the archiving process,
Sure.
and inventory process. But there's also a great resource in COSTEP, Coordinated Statewide Emergency Preparedness, Massachusetts, and they work with MIPA. And they have come up with these kind of how-to things for cultural institutions, of what to do if there's an emergency. Like you said, we don't have to worry about flood. Well, we might have to worry about flood because there's been flooding in parts of Western Mass before. We certainly have had tornadoes. We certainly have had lots of kind of unexpected weather incidents. So they really talk through planning for if there's emergency, who's in charge? What's the chain of command? Who do the people, the local emergency responders know that the irreplaceable collections of the town of Southwick are in that barn? So there was a property in Salem that they had.
we
worked
have a
with the fire
local
department.
emergency planning committee.
Right, so
Which
there's
probably is
already-
not aware of.
I'll
Right,
bet,
so
I
that's
bet
what
Charlie
our
does.
goal in this chapter. is
Charlie
to put
knows
this
a
in
lot.
there, just to put that as like so this is something that probably a short-term goal. This property in Salem, it was a historic house, but they also had some irreplaceable things on the third floor. The local fire department knew that there happened to be a fire, so that was the number. So it's just kind of, okay, what do we need?
Yeah.
Where are the things and what do we need and who's in charge and who calls whom if a tornado goes down that street, kind of a thing. So I think that's what the goal is for that piece of it. But worrying about all the other really scary things of how are we gonna do all this, that's a later step. First, it's figuring out what we have. Okay, my question, is there data or information that the PVPC should gather related to this topic? So if you don't have any answers for that now, you can email John, or we could talk about that later. That was something I stole from Ken, who Kyle works with in a chapter focus group that he worked on. But are there places that I should be going to look for more information?
One of the challenges, the state has various requirements for studies, et cetera, historical, whatever gets redone every so many years. We have tons of stovepipes, and each stovepipe has studies and stuff, some of which are on the town website, some of which may not be. But other than 100 people, the rest of the over 9,000 people in town don't know about all these other resources. They don't know where the stuff is.
All the different plans that have been
Right.
done.
And where you can find them if they're on the town website. They may not be, they may be in a file cabinet.
I'm thinking, what was it, 2007, 2008? They did, the Heritage Landscape Survey for Southwick.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And I'm thinking the areas
Who's
that,
they?
State.
PVPC,
Yeah.
Okay.
Historical Commission, Planning Board, you know, it was a,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, maybe
Okay.
Ken has that as.
Yeah, maybe as a reference in
2007?
there somewhere.
somewhere
Heritage
around
landscapes,
there.
okay.
But, you know, I'm thinking the areas that they identified as heritage landscapes included, let's see, Gillette Corners.
Mhm,
And of course, the entire east side got blown up and there's no more.
mhm,
They identified the Moore House and the vicinity around it. And every single building has either been, other than the Moore House and the, you know,
mhm.
the museum proper. The other barn, you know, the barn across the street,
That's gone.
that's gone.
Yeah,
And, you know, barns behind 83 College Highway, gone.
mhm,
The house got gut rehabbed and vinylized last year. So there's nothing left of that other than, you
mhm.
know, just the Moore House and the cigar factory and shed, and that's it. And the third area was, I believe, the Carvana / Channery Road /
I went up Coles
Southwick,
Hill,
Southwick
Coles Hill
Country
Vista.
Club.
Coles Hill.
Yeah, the Coast
Vista.
Hill stuff, that stuff on
Coast
that
Hill
side of
Vista.
town, the vistas from there, where I'm at.
Yeah,
They're still there.
some of the vistas from Coles Hill are still there. Although, you know, you go to the left or to the right and it's all been residentially developed over the years.
Mhm. So it might be interesting to look at that plan and compare it to
When
the
was, there's
landscape
the
today.
material you had put together from PVPC, there was a reference to that was a MHC reconnaissance
Yes.
survey.
That's my
Town
basis of
report
all.
1980 or 81.
1982.
Okay,
So what was the his heritage? I know we've got copies of that heritage
Heritage Landscapes.
landscape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, that was another. I believe PVPC
Okay,
is the
I'll
one
look
that
for it.
Yeah, I
put
think
it
so.
out. I mean, I've got a copy at home and the Historical Commission has a copy of it, but. You know, it has not been widely circulated by any means.
Okay, so maybe on the town website, it might be useful to have a place for all the,
Should be there.
Yeah, I know
A
that
lot
I
of that
always look
stuff's
on-
on the Historical Commission part of the town website. I mean,
okay.
I don't want, you know, I'd go look there before I concluded that it's not there.
Mhm. Well, I mean, like, for all plans related to the town, if they were in one spot, like some municipal
One-stop shopping.
websites have a plans and documents section on their website, that any plan you're looking for, you could find there, and they're chronologically organized, which they might already be there.
Just
but,
good to know.
Which would be great if it was, like Holyoke had their plans in different places, like their Holyoke has energy and all these different, the historical commission had the stuff that they oversaw, and they just recently put them all in one place so that anybody looking could kind of easily find them. Especially if you paid for an inventory and those inventory projects required a final report. And they're almost, I think Sturbridge has their on there, but they're almost never on websites. So that might be something that,
I've never seen the final report.
never seen the final report. So maybe Mass Historic has it, but I've just noticed that recently, that those reports are never,
You're on a needs to know basis, Lee.
right.
No need, no, no.
Okay, let's be respectful of your time, so we're rounding towards 4:30, so what am I missing?
I had one other item, and it probably relates more to coordination of events across town.
Mhm,
I don't know that there's one clearinghouse or one
Yeah.
central place where you can find out where events are going on.
mhm,
And sometimes it creates a problem if
yeah,
2 or 3 organizations try to have the same thing on the same day at
right,
the same time. I know there's a community calendar on the town website,
mhm,
but I don't know that that's
Almost
the,
anything gets put on.
that's the only
yeah.
coordinating point.
mhm.
But
And
like
then
the
it's
library
mostly
does
town
things
meetings.
and, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody else
They do
does
things
multiple
a lot.
Facebook pages. Various
Right.
organizations have their own Facebook or website
Meet
or
a-
whatever.
And events.
And then you have to have
Yeah.
somebody who manages it, populates it.
Right.
But it's not, I agree, it is a problem in town with various things. But it's also a challenge with our surrounding communities,
Mhm,
because I think it was the first year we had a craft fair for the Friends of the Library.
mhm.
Westfield had this huge pumpkin blowout on the same day.
I was just gonna say Westfield on weekends, that's one of
You
their
know, so
things,
it, somehow to be able to have some
Mhm.
kind of regional type,
right?
calendar.
What is the Chamber of Commerce? Is there a Chamber of Commerce you fall under?
Greater Westfield Chamber of
Greater
Commerce.
Westfield, okay, and you have Westfield Community Television does Southwick as well, right?
No.
We have
No.
Channel
No,
15.
we
Southwick has their
They
own.
work closely together.
Oh,
2 or
okay.
3
Channel
times a
15.
year, you'll see Westfield Community Television in Southwick
Not very often.
on Channel 15, but that's 2 or 3
Okay,
events per year.
so Channel 15 is your community
Community
channel.
channel.
But
And if you
again,
don't
that's
have
the-
cable, you don't,
Yes.
I haven't seen one program of Southwick's cable.
If you go on the town website,
You
you
can
get to
it's there,
Channel
live stream
15
it.
and you can watch the programs.
Your grandchildren
Right, if
can
you
help
have the
with that.
internet.
I've got internet, but it's so slow that, I might as well
Well,
watch
we-
it,
we have
watch
Comcast
paint
in
dry.
town.
buffer.
So the Greater Westfield Chamber
Right,
covers Southwick,
yes.
and you have a community calendar on the town website. But we're not quite sure, but most of the cultural events or things like that do
May
not.
not
make
But
it on
we,
there.
we put ours,
Your
we have,
stuff
we
is
have,
on there.
we have our own separate calendar, but then we
Mhm.
also put it on the town's calendar.
Mm,
But then the town's calendar also has all their meetings and stuff, so
Yeah.
there's a lot.
Yeah,
There's a lot
Right,
going
the
on.
one that populates, I think that the town, usually does it through the meetings that
mhm.
have been,
Right.
filed. I don't think
Public. that
the,
needed to
the
have public
outside, any cultural events, like the
Mhm.
art show or something,
Mm.
would have to go through the town clerk or something to
I
get
think
it
the
posted.
town
maybe not
website,
the
it does
best
have a meeting calendar.
Yeah, there's a
and then it
calendar.
has
Yeah,
the-
there's 2 views.
Community
Yeah, there's
calendar.
two columns.
Events
There's
calendar,
2
yeah.
calendars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
community
it'd be
events.
nice if
Yeah.
somehow there was an organized
Mhm.
funneling of things and,
Sure.
but somebody has
We'll
to.
put you in charge of
Somebody
that
has
after
to
you
be-
get done with this project, because
Right.
that's like herding
Oh,
cats. I mean,
That's a tough.
So that's maybe
Yeah.
something I can discuss further with you about. That's a good question, just to, like,
It's a great
the
concern.
mechanics of it. It's a
Yeah.
big concern.
Yeah.
I
Um,
think we have I think it's possible.
It's more, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. It's not a matter of the website. It's a matter of people, looking there and then before they schedule something, because the typical is it pops up on Facebook, as Linda said. And then, then 3 people immediately say, well, there's a Boy Scout meeting that night and the cultural council's
Right.
meeting that night. And you want to say, well, kind of like when Westfield told us, well, you can't have your 250 parade that weekend because that's our pumpkin fest weekend. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, la-di-da.
And we could have had that because on the date of the corporate, of the incorporation, because Suffield was having something.
Well, yeah, we worked that out with
Yeah.
Suffield. Suffield was
But, yeah,
actually
it
a little,
was-
little bit more amenable about
Yeah.
that than Westfield
Westfield.
was. I just, and that was, I
But
think that was just half humorous, but no, it's like, you know, okay,
You don't
really.
know what's going on next door.
That's why we left Westfield in the first place.
Yeah. I think that's it.
I'm gonna give you one other topic, and I'll try to be very brief on it, and then I want to return to one that you raised, which I was very impressed with. Most of the people around the table know, you know, I've spent my lifetime in agriculture, including growing up on a farm here in town, and I'm very passionate about it, and I still am. And we're down to, give or take, about 10 or a dozen working farms in this town. And you know, that's a matter of definition, but two, there's more, there's certainly a lot more farm property. And there's a lot of farmettes. A lot of people would say, well, you know, Jim, you live on a farmette. But I'm talking about working farms where they're earning a living, doing real agriculture. And I don't know whether we're gonna be able to keep those farms going for another generation, but I sure hope we can. I hope the town will do everything it can. And I don't mean putting farms, you know, signs up on the highway saying we're a farm friendly town. That, you know, talk comes cheap. But to make this the best environment for conducting the business of farming that we can, so that we give them a fighting chance. This is a tough state to farm in, for a lot of different reasons. And so, they already start, with kind of one hand tied behind their back, if you will. So if there's mechanisms and, you know, awareness, everybody loves farmers. I don't think, you know, I don't know what your survey said, but everybody loves the farms, and they talk about them on Facebook. We want to preserve them, this, that, and the other thing. But, the best way to preserve them is to make it possible for them to earn a respectable living from what they're doing. Once they can't do that, then it's just a matter of time, before they're gone. So think about that one. I hope it's already come up and
Well, we
been.
just hosted the farm forum with the Agricultural Commission
Yeah.
a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago. So the topic is on people's minds and they're
it's-
really, they're actively working on it.
You know, it bugs the heck out of me because, you know, there's not a whole lot we can do to support our local tobacco growers other than to be friendly to them, unless we all want to start smoking cigars again. And that, I understand that's not gonna happen. But, I know full well that, you know, there's a lot of people going to Costco and Sam's Club and everywhere else under the sun, buying a lot of produce, and they ought to be buying it at the 4 or 5 farm markets, at least in season, that we have here in this town. It's what I call the, you know, put your money where your mouth is. But if you like farms, patronize them, because that's how they'll stay in business. Enough on that.
Does Southwick have a farmer's market?
No.
No, but we have a number
And
of
don't,
farm stands.
please don't raise that, because
Okay.
the idea comes up, and if you're one of those 5 that's got a farm stand that's open week, you know, year round, week long. Last thing you want is to bring a bunch of people from Suffield, Granby, Granville in here on Saturday morning and give them an
Other vendors,
opportunity.
other
Yeah, other
vendors, okay.
vendors, yeah. We've had, you know, we've had requests to do one on the Congregational Church property, and it's like, I'm not gonna be the one to go tell Lenita that, you know, hey, we set up a farmer's market here, Lenita, to bring people from out of town in to take some more business away
But
from
those
them.
stands are open year round?
No.
Or throughout the season, throughout the season.
Jim, how about the co-op? Has that been discussed? That
Uh,
kind of negates the whole.
Well,
Southwood-
again, you
Southfield,
know,
Granby people,
um,
you gotta be a member.
yeah, that, you know, that's a little bit different issue, but I don't know if, there is a co-op, by the way, I don't know, that uses our church as a distribution center, and I don't know much about them. They're there once every 2 weeks or something.
I'd love to go to one of those farm meetings if we could connect afterwards.
But so then the other point that you raised, and I you know, I hadn't thought of this, but anything that we can do to make this whatever, however you want to define the downtown village, turn it back into a village again,
Give
I
it a
think-
center.
I think is big out of this. So because, you know, I referred to, I'm very involved with the Congregational Church and was privileged to work with Scott and some other people on redoing the Veterans Memorial this
We
past
call it the
year.
town common.
Whatever we call it, yeah,
Good.
but I refer to that piece of Southwick as our front lawn. And if you look at the old pictures, Lee, there was a gazebo there somewhere.
Yeah,
And that was the focal point of Southwick. It was where the roads came together and
Southwick band used to play out of there.
and so, and then you raised the idea of a, you know, senior fitness facility out here on an underutilized resource. And so I just, you know, I want to say I was impressed by that idea. I think it's got some potential. It's good for the merchants. It's good for the institutions. I mean, we take this facility for granted, but it's a beautiful
We're very lucky
town
to
hall
have it.
facility. It's got the nice meeting room, the public meeting room down there. So,
Senior centers here.
senior
community
centers
centers
here.
There's a lot.
Yeah, so then you have people coming in and out of it all day, so that's
The
a good
biggest
thing.
challenge, if there's events, is parking.
yeah,
That's the biggest challenge.
Mhm.
we'll let them park over at the church. Good
I
exercise.
know this is
We do
probably,
that
you know,
our-
not in
our
the
show.
historic cultural part of it,
That's
but,
okay.
but what Jim was talking about, the town center, and I know PVPC does the community development block grant.
Mhm.
Now, I know you guys, house improvement, I know that. It's a thing and you're doing it in phases and you're doing streets and whatever.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if Southwick would be eligible, but what about a facade improvement program? Because that strip, those two strips across the street from the summer house,
Mhm.
if they all had, a brick facade
Mhm.
through the whole thing, matching
Some
the
consistency.
summer house with all, similar signage and whatever, that would look a lot classier
That would
than.
help.
If you look at Westfield, over the last 10 years,
They've
they've
done a
done
lot.
2 or 3 segments of that.
Yeah.
Where people apply and you can get up to
It's like a
$1,500 or whatever.
Or a 50%
In
grant.
Westfield, okay,
or
I'll have
something.
to look at that, because I know Ware is doing a facade improvement, but they had some of the areas that do that through community development block grants, I think they have to have a slum and blight designation first, but I'm sure Westfield doesn't have that, so it must be,
Slum and blight designation.
Plum and blight,
What-
yeah,
what-
I know, we have to do code, yeah.
Well, you're-
Trying to use
Southwick
That's for sure.
has to apply every 2 or 3 years, so Southwick.
Okay, I
typically
will look
does it
into what the
annually.
Westfield facade improvement plan, what the criteria is for applying to that, because now.
Yeah,
I'm curious too.
I worked
Yeah, but
32
they're-
years in Holyoke and I managed the block grants.
Okay,
Well,
Holyoke
all about the.
Does
black-
have slum and blight designations.
Holyoke-
So it was a little easier.
Look on their website, or
Yeah.
look on masslive.com, they just announced it in the last couple of
Mhm.
days.
Yep, yeah, I will look at that for Westfield, but there's also things like, design guidelines, a design review board, there's other
Yeah.
things that you could establish.
We
in-
have,
Southwick has the design guidelines.
Okay,
we don't
From
have
the
a
Pioneer
design
Valley
review
Planning
board.
okay, so some of that you could at
Yeah.
least have maybe
We don't have
some,
requests.
But if they're not, if
Conversations about
they're
things
not
getting
changing
built.
the facade, they don't
Right.
they don't go before design.
right, so
review.
I will look into that, that's a good question, and I know, talking about like, you're saying that town common and kind of redesigning to bring back what an authentic town center was. I know there's funding for that too, because Blandford had their town common chipped away. And right now, they're planning to redesign it, to bring it back, so,
Good.
it's just, these
would
types
be
of things, to have that kind of common, even East Long Meadow has such a tiny, if you've driven around there, it's not a traffic circle. It's not a rotary,
No, I know.
it's a 7 coins, it's a Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah.
To having, it is, and they love it. I know you love it, East Long Meadow, because I just worked on your plans. That's
Just for
where,
the record, right?
yeah, for the record, that's where they have their fireworks. That's where they have their 4th of July parade. That's where they have their tree lighting. And it's just a small, dangerous strip of land.
That's why I
but
think they
that's-
like it.
that's
They
everybody
like to watch us try to drive
because
through
it's
it.
Yes.
defined, it's the heart of where things happen there. So,
But we almost have two communities,
Mhm.
because what you're talking about is the Southwick community of people who live here. There's
Mhm.
nobody here from the lakes.
Right.
The
oh, and
lakes,
we didn't even talk about the lakes.
Yeah.
the
Right.
lakes
Mhm.
have their own world.
Mhm.
You know, and they have the parade on the 4th of July, and they have there's the gazebo down there, they have a
Mhm.
lot of things going on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They send their tax money to town hall.
Yeah.
But other than that.
Are they mostly year round or is it a mix?
Oh, it's year round.
It's
Yeah.
all year.
Almost
And maybe
entirely.
they
Yeah.
feel like they're not invited. And
And
maybe
there's
you
the,
feel like you're not invited there, so
Lake
maybe,
Management Committee, which is part of the town government. And then
Oh, wow.
there's the Citizens Restoring
Yeah.
Congamon,
Right.
which
okay,
is a very active nonprofit.
Very active.
And they do a lot of the programming, I
Mhm.
guess. you should
have they been really involved in this plan of groups from?
I don't know.
We have a focus group, with participation from both of those entities coming up. But,
Okay,
hasn't been scheduled yet.
okay, because the canal went right through the lake and I have a map that I got to hold that was like as long as this table almost
Nice.
from 1904.
Or something like that.
From that Congamon area. So they are just as much involved in the built history and landscape of early Southwick as the rest of
Oh,
Southwick.
yeah.
So
I wouldn't want you to go off thinking though that, I mean,
It's not a town divided.
it's
no.
not a town divided or, you know, it's not
But it's
like,
like Agawam and Feeding Hills where it's the same but different.
you know, there's a little bit of that, but I would say there's, you know, much less than when we were growing up in town. Back then, you know, the railroad, kind of divide, you know, marked because it followed that, path, but it's, you know, there's been some political issues over CPC funds, but again, that's, you know, they are, you know, they are a good example of a group that's fairly well organized.
Okay,
But it's a Southwick Suffield group, and a lot of the
Southwick funds that
yeah,
the people on the Suffield side.
tell us how,
living their
tell us how
$800,000
how they wish we
They don't
funded, yes.
contribute any money to Massachusetts.
That there's, but I, you know,
That's
that they're, you know, I am a member of the CRS or whatever they are. I'm not an active
Mhm.
member, but you know, they have done yeoman's work over there. Because, you know, people forget, but 30, 40 years ago, the Congamon Lakes were a joke. They were on their way to becoming a swamp. Because they were so badly eutrophied. And so they've done some, you know, some really good stuff.
so
Yeah, I
strong
think
group of stakeholders.
Yeah, it is a strong group of stakeholders, you know, if you got lakefront property, and a nice boat, you want, you know, you want the lakes to be well maintained.
Mhm.
Well, and it isn't so much a division as it's people with a specific interest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
You know,
Okay.
Yeah.
we don't have that interest. We don't live on or near the lake.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's nice. We go down and look at it. It's lovely, but
Okay,
I suppose this is as
Understood.
good a time as any to just point out, our one public member had to hop off, but she did, to bring up Congamon Lakes, and, you know, her mind as a cultural opportunity, you know, the activities that it does
Yeah.
support, and in a similar fashion, the rail trail.
Mhm.
And Kyle and I will take a look at the recording and figure out if she was trying to respond to something about the signage out there, but hit
Okay.
the wrong button.
Right.
But anyway, so,
So she did a chat? She did
oh,
a
yeah,
chat?
there were a couple comments that popped up in
who was on? Do we know?
Diane Gale.
Okay. And she seemed to be doing some hobby stuff. I was trying to see. what was she doing.
Oh,
I wasn't
man,
able to figure out what she was working on.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
She's busy.
And actually, I don't even think, I don't have Congamon Lakes on here as a site, so that's a big oversight, so I will add that.
And there's a lot of history with the hotels
yeah.
and,
Ice houses.
Ice-
Ice, yeah.
ice house, yeah.
Well, and there's that whole wildlife area that the state owns. I mean, they own, and then we own the property
North
next to the
Pond
state
property.
property.
North
Yeah,
Pond.
the North Pond property.
Is that
Hundreds
the
of
Southwick
acres.
Wildlife Management
Yes,
area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and at one
Right,
time,
right next to the Connecticut one, which is a couple hundred acres on the Connecticut side.
Okay.
and at one time that was owned by the King family, King's Beach, and they had individual little cabins that people could rent.
Oh, wow,
So people would come to Southwick in the summer.
okay.
All that, I think all of that is pretty well been removed.
Mhm.
I mean, the other thing we didn't touch on at all that is huge in Southwick is motocross.
Oh, I've got that on my list, with
Okay.
338 motocross track.
Yeah.
Mhm, right. Is that valued primarily by residents? Maybe
By
you
a
don't live
certain
right next to it.
sector, yeah.
Yeah,
Depends on how close you live.
right,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
yes,
I
I know
think,
it's right next to Wally.
How long has it been here? How long has it? been?
Oh.
Since the 1970s.
Yeah.
And it's probably, is it the only one in this area?
oh, yeah.
Of its
It
caliber.
In
brings it
terms of, you know,
national.
yeah,
We have the national.
yeah, we have a national event
Really
here
cool.
every year. I,
It's-
you
it's
know,
an event
I,
You can see on NBC Sports.
Oh, wow.
I believe, you know, it can be inconvenient, that weekend of the Nationals.
Traffic noise.
Traffic and noise and so forth, but it's in, you know, May or June, when you're out and
It's
it's
one
one
day.
weekend.
Yeah.
I think the
Don't
town
people
is very,
commute for the
it
Rugged
would,
Maniac
would-
at that site?
yeah,
With
they
the
have-
Rugged
Oh, yeah.
Maniac?
That's in
Yeah,
September,
yeah.
October.
Which that's
And
national.
they've been
That's
very
really
good
cool that
over
that's in-
time about allowing different civic groups to park cars at the school complex
Mhm.
and keep the money. So it's been,
Oh, wow.
you know, good.
That's great.
You know, I wouldn't want you to take, you know, take away that that's regarded as a,
Oh, no,
you know, but
that's
there
on my list of
clearly,
assets.
clearly there would be people that, you know, don't like that sport or, you know,
But there is historical significance.
Yes,
to that.
yeah. it's
Yeah.
been around a
50
long
plus
time.
years.
yeah,
Mhm.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's a cultural thing that appeals to younger people.
absolutely.
Because you gotta be like 18 or no, 16 to 25 probably to compete. If you get older than that, it's painful.
You're just
Did-
beating up your body.
It's, since I was late, you probably covered this, but did you get the Gorge property on your
No,
list?
they-
Granville Gorge?
Yes, okay,
Do that either.
okay.
We didn't
Big-
talk about it, but it's on my list.
Did
in the
anything
chapter.
historical happen? Was there any kind of a illegal distilling process going on?
There was,
Like,
in the gorge?
there was a mill on that, in that area.
Real?
Yes.
Water powered,
Water powered, I think, sawmill. And if you look at the 1855 map, 1870 map, it shows it, I'm pretty sure.
wow.
I think if you, and, you know, I've no, you know, other than, you know, looking around. I think if you look at the sum total of, you know, Southwick's cultural and, you know, environmental resources. I'm not sure there's another town around here that can match us for the diversity. So we've got the lakes, you know, just said we've got the New England trail that comes through here. We've got the rail trail that traverses right through the center of town. We've got the Granville Gorge, we've got the Sopanowski thing, which is
And then off from North, South Long Yard. That's
the
the state
wildlife management. I just put something, I don't know if you look at the, you know, you're from Southwick group, but I just put a nice tour of the wildlife management thing a week or two ago there. But we've got really nice resources when you look at
No
all of
doubt.
it. We've got a town beach, which is way underutilized.
Yeah, I think that's struggling to see what it's gonna be.
Why is it underutilized?
I don't know.
People don't know. about
People
it.
don't even know it exists, or don't know how. to
Or they
find it.
got
And
pools
there's
in their
no park.
backyard.
Yeah, that's true. It's, I mean, it's small and the town has to fund a lifeguard. and-
It's nice. I took my grandkids there
Yeah, I
when they
did
were
too.
little.
So we
They
had,
liked it.
you know, we did have the shut the lake swimming down, because of bacterial
Yeah.
levels,
Right.
which does not help that.
That's
Exactly.
That's why.
Yeah.
It doesn't help people say, let's go swim in the lake.
That is a challenge. All right, well, if there's anything that you think of that comes to you after, please.
Yeah.
You can email John, or I think I'm not sure if we're all on the same email, but my email is on the PVPC website. But it's just S Walsh, SWALSH @pvpc.org. Or you could call the main PVPC number, SWALSH @pvpc.org. And I will add we will add whatever you want to share to the notes. Thank you for recording.
It's a tool for both of us. So.
Yes. Because it helps to be able to go back and see anything that we missed. But I appreciate you coming here tonight and taking the time. This was really very helpful. Getting your feedback.
Good stuff.
Yes, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.